Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. This morning's Green Recovery Roundtable with Green Party Leader Annamie Paul and special guests Allie Rougeot, Lylou Sehili, Tavie Johnson, Lilah Williamson, and Samia Sami will now begin. La table ronde pour une reprise verte avec la chef du Parti vert Annamie Paul et ses invités Allie Rougeot, Lylou Sehili, Tavie Johnson, Lilah Williamson et Samia Sami va maintenant commencer.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you, everyone. Good morning. J'espère que tout le monde a passé une bonne journée. I come to you today from the traditional territories of the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat. I come to you today from the traditional territories of, pardon, je le dis en français. Je vous adresse aujourd'hui des territoires traditionnels des Mississauga, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee et Huron-Wendat, et j'offre tous mes remerciements. I am so excited. I've been looking forward to this particular panel all week long. For those of you who join me, you know that I normally host anywhere from 1 to 3 roundtables a week. They're all incredibly important. They're all about issues that matter. This one is one that I'm particularly excited about. I've really been looking forward to. This is a panel of just coast to coast to coast climate superstars, youth climate activists, the people who really are the leaders of the climate movement here in Canada. And I'm really excited today to bring them together to begin a discussion about a green recovery, a green and just recovery, and what that looks like from their perspective, and just also how we're doing. You know, a lot has been said lately about the climate. A lot has been announced, or plans are indicated. There's legislation underway. I'm so curious to know how they all feel about it. Whatever we say as a party always is going to be informed by what we're hearing from those who are going to be most impacted by our decisions. And there's no question that youth have the most at stake in terms of our warming climate. And so I'm really pleased to have this opportunity. Je suis très contente d'avoir cette opportunité aujourd'hui de parler avec nos invités. Ils sont là en première ligne dans notre lutte contre la crise climatique. Ils sont les leaders, ils sont les personnes qui organisent notre mouvement civique pour lutter contre la crise. Et c'est un excellent moment d'avoir un échange avec eux. Exactement, parce que c'est le moment où on parle du climat, c'est le moment de notre budget, c'est le moment de faire un bilan. Et le Parti vert est toujours très intéressé de parler avec les personnes qui seraient plus touchées, le plus impactées par les décisions et les politiques. Et c'est clair que les jeunes ont un très grand intérêt dans l'avenir et le succès de notre lutte contre la crise climatique. And so I want to get us started. We have, as Rosie said, six panelists with us today. I'm going to ask a few to introduce themselves and then throw out a question to them, and then we'll do the next few and throw out a question to them, and then bring everyone in. I'm going to keep my remarks basically to that, only to say that the Green Party is extremely committed to launching a green and just recovery. That is the very best thing that we can do post-pandemic. It is the thing we need to do in order to bend the curve on climate warming. It is the thing that we need to do to set up our country for the future, to create an economy that is just and sustainable and respects the limits of our planet. And so we are going to continue to work toward that, and that's our objective. Alors, notre but, c'est de continuer à pousser pour une relance verte, une qui respecte les limites de notre planète, une relance verte qui crée les emplois de l'avenir dans les secteurs verts de l'avenir, et une relance verte qui a le but d'accélérer notre transition vers une économie de zéro émission. And with that, here we go. I'm really looking forward to this. So I'm first going to ask Alénor, Lylou, and Rosalie to introduce themselves in that order. Vous pouvez faire vos remarques soit en anglais, soit en français, ou dans les deux. C'est à vous à décider. We'll start with Alénor.
Sure. Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. My name is Aliénor, or Ali. I'm located on Treaty 13 territory in what's now known as Toronto. I coordinate the youth climate strike movement here in Toronto, and I also study economics and public policy at the University of Toronto here. And the topics that I'm most passionate about are making sure that the justice component of climate justice really gets the attention it needs, and also making sure that we empower more and more young people to find their voice, to advocate for the things that they care about. Donc bonjour tout le monde, je m'appelle Aliénor et je suis la coordinatrice du mouvement Fridays for Future ici à Toronto.
Merci Aliénor. Lylou?
Oui, bonjour tout le monde. Donc, c'est ça, moi c'est Lylou, je suis mon elle. J'habite à Tiohtià:ke, aussi appelé Montréal, mais en ce moment, je vous parle depuis le territoire de la nation algonquine Anishinaabe. J'ai milité dans divers mouvements blancs qui étaient pour la justice environnementale, mais depuis, je pense qu'il y a eu beaucoup de choses qui se sont passées, puis maintenant, je m'oriente vraiment plus sur pas seulement la composante environnementale, mais comme Ali l'a très bien expliqué, comment est-ce que tout ça entre en cohésion avec la justice climatique. Donc, à ce niveau-là, j'axe vraiment plus mon militantisme sur les réseaux plus locaux, puis sur les relations humaines, donc les relations que les groupes créent entre eux, les interactions entre les individus, puis parce que selon moi, c'est ça qui va passer, c'est par ça que ça va passer la transition, la vraie transition. Elle va être humaine, elle va pas nécessairement être verte, mais elle va être humaine. Donc c'est plus ça mon angle d'approche.
Merci Lylou.
Rosalie.
Parfait, merci Lylou. Excuse-moi, Rosalie?
Hi, my name is Rosalie. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a co-founder of the SEV, which is the Youth Coalition for Climate Strikes in Quebec. I'm currently in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal, unceded territories of Ghanaian nations. And I see really the just recovery, the green recovery, just one, and for intergenerational justice too. I think it's the one that I can advocate for here.
Fantastic.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, merci. Thank you so much. So the question I want to throw out to you is, it actually is a good springboard from Rosalie's comments there. I just want to know from you, how do you think things are going? This is, you know that the government is about to put forward its next budget, that we are thinking about the post-pandemic recovery. The climate emergency did not take any kind of a pause during the pandemic. In terms of what you see, in terms of policy, in terms of attitudes, in terms of where you see us headed, I'd just like to know first how you think we're doing. Et je le répète en français, je veux savoir comment ça va. C'est un moment où nous sommes en train de préparer pour une relance post-pandémie. Il y a des annonces sur le climat et malheureusement, le climat n'a pas pris une pause. Alors, je veux juste alors lancer cette question. Comment ça va? I'll just again, I'll ask all of you to maybe contribute to that. I'm not gonna, you can feel free to have a bit of a discussion about that. Rosalie, Lylou, Aliénor, any of you can jump in.
Maybe I can start because I'm really frustrated about how it's going on. In fact, we've seen the government do promises about planting trees, for example, at the beginning of his term. And at the confidence vote, he just said the same old promises that he's not doing. So that's not going well in that way. And also, there's no green recovery. There's nothing green in his head right now, as we've seen that fossil fuel subsidies has increased by 200% since COVID, compared to 2019 subsidies that we gave to fossil fuels. So I think that's the first red flag that we have from the government. So for me, it's not going well at all.
Lylou, Alena?
Oui, ben pour moi non plus, je pense pas que ça va pas très bien parce qu'en ce moment, les plans, c'est tout le temps de trouver comment faire on parle de la relance économique, comment faire pour retourner à la situation initiale en passant par des chemins verts, des chemins équitables, des chemins différents, alors que non, l'objectif, ce n'est pas de retourner au stade initial, ce n'est pas de retourner à la situation d'avant. La situation d'avant était problématique. Donc, tant qu'on continue à avoir ça comme objectif, je pense que c'est problématique. Donc, c'est ça. Je vais laisser un peu les autres parler. Je vais laisser la parole à d'autres personnes.
Eleanor?
Yeah, I'll go switch back to English. I agree that there's quite some discontent on my part too. I think one of my biggest disappointments was seeing that there's really an attempt to try to just create the system we already have, which we know is flawed, and just try to make it slightly green or just tweak it a little bit so it looks clean or electric, as if that was going to be a good little fix to the whole huge problems we have of many intersecting crises. So what disappoints me is that there's really still no acknowledgement of, okay, we're in a very, very deeply rooted issue, and it's going to take a very deeply ambitious recovery to address that. And with that, I'll say the government also hasn't really addressed some of our fears, maybe as youth, maybe as adults too, of the fact that they haven't been really transparent and accountable on many other things. And so it's hard for us to trust the path they're taking with this recovery as well. We're a little bit scared that it's going to be their business as usual.
Great. We're going to come back to that. I'm going to bring in our additional three. Three. Speakers, just again to do the same thing, first to introduce themselves, and then I'll throw out a question. So we have Tavie, Lilah, and Samia, and I'll just ask Tavie if you want to just introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Tavie.
Tavie, sorry.
No worries. It's okay. I use she, her pronouns. I'm 17 years old and I organize with Climate Strike Canada and Sustainability Teens. I'm on traditional, ancestral, and the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples in so-called North Vancouver. And I'm planning on studying life sciences at the University of Toronto next year. So that's a little bit about me, and I'll just keep my introduction brief.
Thank you. Lilah?
Hi everyone, my name is Lilah. I use she, her pronouns. I'm joining today from the unceded territory of also the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish people, also known as Burnaby. I'm a high school student here in Burnaby in grade 11 and coordinator with the climate strike movement in Vancouver called Sustainability Teens.
Samia?
Hello everyone, my name is Samia Sami. I'm located in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, traditional Sixth territory of Cree, Nakota, and Métis people. I'm pursuing a degree in electrical engineering at the University of Saskatchewan, and I'm an advocate researcher with my main areas of research being renewable energy and sustainable electric grids. I'm serving as a chair of the IEEE Power and Energy Society, where through that I'm empowering the youth of Saskatchewan for a sustainable renewable energy future.
Thank you so much to all of you for being with us. And the question that I want to ask before we start heading into what comes next is just focused on this moment for a second. I'd love to know from the three of you, how has the pandemic impacted your work? And what is the feeling? I mean, are you finding that people are still aware, that they're still responsive? That you're still able to organize? Do you feel that the climate has dropped down on the agenda? I'm just curious, again, as organizers, what the impact has been on your work. And I'll just throw it to Lilah. And again, after that, just feel free to open up, and anyone who wants to say something, go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think definitely for the climate strike movement in general, which is where I do a lot of my organizing, it's definitely been a challenge because we are such a protest-based movement. And so to not be able to do that has definitely been really difficult. But I think there's kind of two things. I think definitely climate has dropped down on the agenda below COVID-19 and the pandemic, which is absolutely understandable. And that definitely needs to be a priority for sure. But I think what's interesting about the pandemic is that it has shown us that our government knows exactly how to mobilize for an emergency, and our government knows exactly what to do to tackle a crisis that's really urgent and do whatever it takes to protect people. And our society knows how to do that too. We all stayed in our homes for many months in order to stop the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so I don't think there's any excuses anymore for not tackling the climate crisis, because we know there's the funding, we know there's all of the resources available, and we know there's the government capacity as well as the social capacity. We just need the political will and the social will to be able to do it. And so I think that's a lot of what we're pushing on now is like, we need to tackle the climate emergency like we tackle the COVID-19 emergency, and we know that it's possible.
I mean, I could say a million things, but I'm really trying to keep my mouth shut as much as possible. I just love that. And, you know, I'm clapping in my head. But Samia, Tavie, anything you want to add before we throw out some questions to all of you?
I can add to it. Most of my work is in the research side, in the innovation side. And yes, it does have affected, COVID has affected the participation. But again, there was one advantage that we received was that since everything was online, we were more able to discuss about it and more able to work on our research and focus on areas that we wanted to focus. So that was the good side of it. But again, coming together and making a concrete plan is what that I'm looking forward to after COVID.
Great. Tavie, you don't feel that you need to, but if there's anything you wanted to add.
I definitely echo Lilah's message. That's very, very true in many ways. Yeah, I think we definitely have the capability to tackle the climate crisis with the resources and the technology that we already have. And I think a lot of how we're going to do that comes through storytelling and really appealing to people's emotions and bringing in this concept that the climate crisis isn't something that's going to affect our children specifically. It's affecting us right now, and that's, I think, how we're going to mobilize people effectively.
Yeah. Yeah, that there is definitely, Lilah, you're absolutely correct. It's we've proven, you know, we have one less barrier, one less argument that can be made. You know, we have proven that we can do things that require mass mobilization, that require massive investment, that require people to make major changes to their lifestyles if they want to. We've proven that. And I would say that is one of the silver linings of the pandemic, that now we have that proof that it is possible, that we can do it. I take a lot of inspiration from that, I have to say. And if we can transfer some of that, then everything is possible, you know? And so let's look forward. As you said, as many of you have said, it's about what comes next. There's these frustrations, there's this lack of ambition. It doesn't correspond, what's being proposed doesn't necessarily correspond to the action that is needed. So when we talk about a green recovery, without me saying anything more about what we see as the key elements of a green recovery, I'd love to hear from all of you what the plan, post-pandemic plan, what your green recovery looks like. What are some of the key elements? Alors, si vous voulez partager vos visions d'une relance verte, quels sont les éléments clés? Quelles sont les choses que vous cherchez ou vous allez militer pour assurer sont là, soit dans le budget, soit dans les projets de loi? I'd just love to hear from you about that. And you can feel free again. If I have to moderate traffic, I will, but otherwise, just feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I can start off and then
Sure.
then everyone else can join in. Yeah, so I think there's There's kind of three things for me that I think are like my biggest personal priorities in terms of adjusting green recovery. So I think the first thing is just ending the construction of all new fossil fuel infrastructure and stopping projects like TMX and other like pipeline projects and stuff like that. I think there's literally no economic or social or environmental reason to be constructing new fossil fuel infrastructure anymore. The fossil fuel industry is a dying industry. We saw the price of oil go negative during the pandemic, and it's time to just bite the bullet, transition to renewable energy, and ensure green jobs for everyone in Canada. And I think that's really the biggest first step we need to take towards climate justice and towards a truly just and green recovery. I think second thing is Indigenous sovereignty. I think that needs to be a massive, massive part of any sort of recovery plan that we have, because Indigenous sovereignty is climate action at the end of the day. And Indigenous people have been stewards of this land long before we arrived here. And so I think that includes things like the full implementation of UNDRIP into binding law, and things like that. And then I would say the last thing for me personally is I'm very interested in like how politics and climate are related and like how we can use political power to be able to stop the climate crisis. And so I think implementing proportional representation and like stopping first past the post and getting rid of that system is also a huge part of it, because I think having a really strong democracy and having things like proportional representation will be able to allow us to fight for climate action a lot more effectively. So yeah, I'll let everyone else talk.
Oh, but yes, and yes. The countries that have proportional representation have gone further on the climate than those that don't. And you're absolutely right. We seem to not be able to produce energy projects, particularly pipeline projects, without completely trampling on Indigenous sovereignty. Coastal GasLink is doing that. The TMX project is doing that. Keystone was doing that. And that is, enough of a red flag, absolutely. Anyone else want to? What does it look like to you? That is a really great start. Aliénor?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Lilah on all these points. And I want to add some perhaps maybe like a little broader or structural things that I very much fear is not being addressed right now. The first one is going beyond the programs and the targeted policies, which are going to be needed. I really want us to talk about the decision-making power that we give to youth, to Indigenous folks, and to people of color. And I really love being, consulted at the end of a whole policy by, this is the policy proposal, let's have a consultation. But I would love much more to actually co-create some of the solutions, and especially the ones that really are going to be more impacting my life than the decision maker's life. And so I think maybe that's a lot to ask from a just recovery plan, but starting to put in place the tangible ways in which we will know, like soon enough, we'll have some decision-making power and we don't have to wait 50 years to run ourselves. I think that's a big one that I'd like to see, or at least like to see talked about. And the second one is related. It's about intergenerational inequalities. I study economics, and I can't help but be a little afraid when I see the spending we're having right now and the debt. Don't get me wrong, I'm very much pro spending and spending massively when there's a crisis. But the thing is, I think we have to spend in a way that's going to make sure that later on, when we have to repay the debt burden, we also don't have to be spending billions on climate adaptation or on dealing with climate disasters, right? Same thing, we have an affordability crisis of housing. If young people are later on having low wages, no housing, and we have this massive debt to spend, you're really putting a lot of burden on young people. And we really have no say until in many years about it. So these two bigger lenses are the ones that I'm not even seeing in conversations right now.
Thank you very much. We're trying to inject those into the conversation. We just had a housing and homelessness roundtable last week, and we're going to continue to be talking about that and campaigning on that. And I can tell you, as the person that I am, that there is nothing more frustrating than being consulted on someone else's plan for your life or your community. That is the story of my life, of the Black diaspora in this country, and of course for many other marginalized and racialized communities as well. And so you're absolutely right, and it is not too much to ask. I will say, I will already say that it's not complicated. It's not too much to ask. I mean, all of you, I'm sure, have something to contribute to this one. what else beyond the things that we've heard so far? What are the elements of a green recovery that you want to make sure don't get lost? Lylou, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Oui, ben, je suis totalement d'accord avec ce qu'Allie et Lilah ont dit plus tôt, là, c'est tellement vrai. Moi, peut-être le point sur lequel j'insisterais, c'est qu'on peut avoir des projets d'envergure à l'échelle du Canada, à l'échelle des provinces, mais je pense que ça va aussi, la transition, elle va aussi passer par un investissement massif dans les communautés. Donc, les communautés locales pour libérer du temps pour ces communautés-là, pour que les gens puissent se reconnaître entre voisins, puissent construire, puissent partager du temps, des repas, pour qu'il y ait un vrai tissu, que les communautés deviennent plus solidaires, plus résilientes, parce que c'est par ces changements-là, c'est ces changements de mentalité, c'est l'empathie, c'est la compassion envers l'autre que ça va passer. Donc, je pense que c'est vraiment, vraiment, vraiment primordial de pas oublier que les communautés sont capables d'elles-mêmes de beaux projets, puis de les laisser faire, de ne pas trop essayer de tout cadrer, de ne pas essayer de tout institutionnaliser à l'échelle du Canada. Donc, je pense que c'est un point très, très important dans la transition parce que on peut mettre les lois, les mesures qu'on veut en place, mais si la population n'appuie pas ça, on n'ira nulle part. Donc, tout ce que les filles ont dit, j'appuie, puis je passe la parole à quelqu'un d'autre.
Merci Lylou. Oui, j'étais tellement et je reste tellement inspirée par tous les gestes de solidarité parmi les gens pendant la pandémie. Alors, imaginez-vous si on garde cet esprit de solidarité pour notre lutte contre la crise climatique. Bon, imaginez-vous, hein? Moi, j'imagine. Anyone, again, just throw yourself in there. Rosalie, I saw you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, I can up on that. I believe that the pandemic has given us the capacity to make the distinction between luxury and essential. What is essential and what we really need and what we want is really different. What we really need right now, what I need is social interaction, is a sense of community, is what we really want. And that's how we build projects. That's how we build the green recovery is how it's going to be built. And we need for that to not go back to the goal of GDP growth and eternal GDP growth that is on the final planet. And that is where we don't want to go back. We want to grow our communities, want to grow our empathy for one another, and that's where we want to go. We don't want to go back to just infinite profits for nothing at the end. If you need to go to one crisis to another, which is inherently capitalism, and we don't want that at all. That's the radical view of a green recovery in my mind.
Yeah, radical or just good common sense, you know, or what's necessary. Is there anyone else who wanted to jump in on this before I throw out the next question? This is a chance to just share again. What are those few things? If they've been covered, great. But Tavie?
Yeah. One of the key components in my mind is holding the biggest funders of the climate crisis. So banks and insurance companies and other corporations responsible to climate reparations, because they're the ones who have accelerated and exacerbated this crisis the most. And we saw some campaigning around that with January 29th, which was the Fossil Banks Day of Action, but that really needs to continue in part with our recovery. And also, because I have an interest in going into medicine, the topic of like global health and intersecting with the climate crisis has been of interest to me lately, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic. So addressing environmental racism at its roots and seeing what causes these disparities in healthcare and inequity in healthcare is really important in green and just recovery.
Okay, we're good with that one? I'm just going to, this doesn't surprise me at all, of course, but we've heard throughout your responses just a lot of recognition about the interconnectedness of things, and also the impossibility of separating social justice, racial justice from climate justice as well. I see heads nodding. I think that's enough of a prompt. Any observations about that and the place of those elements within a green recovery beyond what you've said? Does anyone want to share some thoughts about that? Samia?
I can start on that. Agriculture, I believe, is one of the main sectors that is driving the economy of Saskatchewan. And it's just very heartbreaking that it is one of the most vulnerable sector here that is being affected by the climate change. So I personally don't want just public funds allocated towards a sustainable agriculture or farm management. I want more of a public attention, or more of like actual management of those funds, actual policies being out, actual tracing being done towards it. In addition to those, agriculture being one of the sector, I also want to highlight more of like climate smart infrastructures like buildings, more like transportation systems. So here in Saskatoon, we receive one of the highest amount of sunlight, but unfortunately, we are not making use of it in terms of putting solar panels, in terms of putting wind, in terms of using these energy. So it's not just to a point where you just allocate funds and don't use it, don't track it, don't manage it. It's more about actually taking active, actions proactively.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Anyone really? I'm not gonna. Anyone who has something they want to say to build on that. Yeah.
I can maybe add to that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely, Rosalie. Please.
Yeah, sorry, my internet is unstable.
Don't worry.
But there will be funds to to give the economy some sort of momentum, and those funds need to be tied with conditions of green transitions. If we give funds to the agriculture, for example, we need to say it's conditional to reducing the amount of livestock, for example. Or if we give funds to any industry, it's conditioned to changing your technology, so you're using less fossil fuels, or just so it needs to have that ties to be really effective.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Just today, we'll be putting out a release talking about that in the context of the airline industry, because there is a big bailout that is planned. And of course, Rosalie, absolutely, it should be conditional. It should be conditional on that very carbon-intensive industry doing its fair share in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And we have the leverage to do it now, right? If we're going to be loaning billions of our dollars, their taxpayer dollars, their dollars of people in Canada, to an industry, then it has to come with conditions, as you said, absolutely, and other industries as well. There's no question. Anyone else want to jump in on this, Allie?
Related to the ties question, I like the idea of having green ties that actually tell us what are you going to do with this. And because we talked about climate justice, there needs to be justice ties. They're starting to have lists of industries that got bailout money and then did give dividends to shareholders, and while ending some employment, terminating some employment, that's also a climate justice issue. We need to make sure that those ties are not only external carbon reductions, but also, are you using that money in a way that's going to continue empowering us all and making sure that recovery kind of benefits us all. And I say that because one of my biggest fears is us finally addressing the carbon issue, getting our emissions down, making sure we get everything in place, and then having another ecological crisis, or another crisis around big tech and privacy, or another crisis, and just realizing that we just fixed a tiny bit because we had that one KPI, and instead of just kind of looking at the bigger thing. So with the ties, let's be really ambitious on what we tie them to.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. And so maybe, I know not everyone has covered this question, but with the time we have left, I would really like to hear from as many of you as possible then about, pulling all of this together. Do you feel hopeful? Do you feel like we have what it takes to make the most of this moment? I hear you all saying that you're looking for ambition, that you also believe that it's doable, that we've demonstrated that it's doable, that we need to be holistic, that we need to understand that we can't tinker around the edges anymore. In terms of this, if you could project your mind into the next 6 months to a year, what is the ideal? What is this time next year, for instance, what will the green recovery have looked like? What are the things that you absolutely are going to be out there insisting are there? And how do you think we will get there? How do you think we're going to get people in Canada to get there? And I'd love you to just touch upon the political part of it. What do you expect from the political leadership in this country? Lylou? Alors, je vais le répéter en français aussi. Je veux juste, je sais que, je sais pas pour vous, c'est pas pour toi. C'est juste pour dire que je demande quelles sont les demandes de notre leadership politique dans une année, quelles devraient être les choses mises en place pour assurer une relance verte. Vous avez reconnu que tout est interconnecté, qu'on doit avoir la justice sociale au même moment que justice climatique. Quels sont vous avez parlé aussi des éléments, mais je voulais savoir qu'est-ce que vous allez faire pour pousser notre pays, les gens dans notre pays, et aussi notre leadership politique vers ces objectifs. Lylou?
Well, Lilah, you can go. I think you had something to say.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Sure, Lilah?
Thank you. So I definitely think I've talked a lot about kind of what I want to see in a green recovery. But I think a really important component of this is people power, because I think at the end of the day, like, if our government doesn't have the political will on their own to be ambitious enough to institute the kind of green recovery that we need, which, there's whispers of a federal election, so that could definitely change. But our government right now has not shown that they are willing to be as ambitious as we need to be during the climate emergency. And so then I think it comes down to, we need every single person to be pushing for this. And I think something that really inspires me and gives me hope is there's this idea in like movement theory that if you mobilize 3.5% of the population actively, then you will succeed no matter what. And we, on the September 27th climate strike, got that percentage of the population in the streets demanding climate justice. And so even if all of those people who came out to climate strikes in September, if all of those people get involved actively in pushing for green and just recovery, it is absolutely 100% without a doubt, research proven possible. And so I think that's really inspiring. But I think we also, like, what youth need to do and what everyone needs to do is push for every single person to get involved in whatever way that works for them, whatever capacity they can contribute. And then we can definitely make it happen.
Thanks, Lilah. Lylou?
Ouais, je suis à fond d'accord avec ce que Lilah a dit. Puis, en lien avec ça, exact, je pense qu'on a tous un peu organisé des manifestations dans les derniers mois, les dernières années. Puis que, de mon côté, je sais que c'est ce qui a un peu engendré ma perte de confiance, où j'ai plus nécessairement espoir en les institutions politiques qui existent. Dans le sens où le but de ces manifestations-là, c'est de faire pression sur les gouvernements. Les gouvernements n'ont pas agi. Donc, je sais qu'il y a beaucoup de personnes dans les mouvements militants qui se sont un peu détachées de ça. Puis, je pense que si les institutions politiques ont encore un rôle à jouer, c'est de radicaliser le discours public. Donc, vraiment de commencer à aborder des enjeux qui auraient dû être abordés il y a vraiment longtemps, mais parce qu'on voulait être dans ce qui est considéré comme convenable, on n'adressait pas ces enjeux-là, mais c'est même plus un enjeu il faut en parler, c'est même plus une question. Puis que, je sais pas, il faut aussi se baser sur moi, j'ai espoir en l'humain, puis on pense que dans quelques années, si j'ai espoir que les choses puissent avoir changé, c'est peut-être dans l'emprise que le système néolibéral, le système capitaliste a sur l'emprise l'emprise que ce système-là a sur les gens. Donc, c'est fou à quel point ça dicte nos comportements de tous les jours, à quel point nos vies sont menées par ce système-là. Donc, si ce système-là réussit à reculer un peu, il y a tellement de liens en ce moment, des liens intrinsèques dans nos vies. Si on arrive à faire fi de ces liens-là, à les éliminer tranquillement, puis que les communautés commencent j'en parlais tantôt, à s'organiser entre elles, à créer entre elles, à construire, à reposer sur mes voisins plutôt que sur des compagnies, des institutions. Ben, je pense que le réel changement est possible, plutôt que de penser à large échelle. Vraiment, je pense que c'est vraiment plus pertinent de penser à comment est-ce que je peux changer le monde autour de moi plutôt que de changer le monde entier.
Merci. Quelqu'un d'autre? Anyone else on this? Aliena?
Sure. I want to add a bit about what I think governments can do for us in a way. And there's a lot of things they can do by not doing certain things they already do right now, which is how much they criminalize activism. In some ways, they criminalize community networks and community resiliency networks. And if we stop just making it criminal or dangerous or threatening to be resilient, then I think what the beautiful vision that Lylou just shared would actually be able to just kind of blossom right away. So maybe one good way to help is stop being actively not helpful. And then on the other hand, and that kind of reflects what Lilah was saying, we do, us and us in a broader way, because most of us here actually do it, we do need to continue telling our elected officials what we need, not necessarily because they always listen, don't get me wrong, but because it's a fact that in Ottawa, there are other people, the big industries, the big polluters, that are constantly in their ear, telling them what they need. So, you know, we just have to at least make sure the conversation is balanced and they hear us as much as they hear them. And then they can make that choice and we can blame them for not listening. But at least we have to make sure that we're constantly them as much as those big, powerful industries are.
That's great. And that's one of the main purposes of a roundtable like this. The intention is to give you the platform in an unfiltered way to communicate those messages. And I wish there were more of them. We'll certainly be doing more of these and inviting you, all of you, back. I have to say very sincerely that I am not looking, hoping that one day you will all become leaders. You are leaders right now. This is what leadership looks like. And certainly in terms of our parliament and the next parliament, we need more leaders like you in parliament. It's not something for people at the end stages of their lives. It's for people of all diverse backgrounds. It's supposed to reflect all of the diversity of perspectives in Canada. And that means we do need youth to be elected to parliament. You can represent your community and of course issues very, very well from a very young age. There's no special skill set for a parliamentarian other than the kind of leadership and passion and knowledge that all of you have. So those of you who are over 18, I know you aren't all, I hope that you will consider it even as early as the next election. It's not an impossible thing at all. And the country really needs that leadership within politics as well, for the reasons Aliena said. Alors, oui, juste pour renforcer ou souligner que vous êtes déjà des leaders, je sais que vous le sachez, mais on a besoin de votre leadership dans le Parlement. Là, à la table, quand il y a des discussions sur les projets de loi, quand il y a les négociations et pas uniquement après. Alors, j'espère que vous allez penser, considérer ou vous allez identifier des militants dans vos organisations pour et leur nominer ou leur encourager d'aller chercher un siège. Parce que le Parlement va fonctionner beaucoup mieux quand il y a une diversité de perspectives. So, this is the first, and it was so important for us to start this series of roundtables on a green recovery with all of you. And I really want to thank you for your insights. And as I said, for your leadership, for the concrete policy suggestions that you have put out, and for your understanding again of how all these things are connected. And thank you for being ambitious, really, in terms of a green recovery. And I share that ambition. And so we will definitely talk about this again. Merci beaucoup, Patricie. Please hold on. We're going to say goodbye to our friends on Facebook. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. Merci à tout le monde d'être ici avec nous. Et nous allons absolument réinviter nos panélistes pour une autre table ronde. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, everyone. We'll now start with questions. We do have one question from Morgan from the National Observer. On va commencer avec les questions. Alors, une question, un suivi. So one question, please, Morgan, and one follow-up.
Hi, thanks for putting this on and letting us know. I've spoken to a couple of you over the last year, and there was a note of kind of, you know, the unfortunate nature of not being able to go out on the street and have that political power expressed there. And I've also heard about, you know, the planning and what's been going on in the background in this last year. But I'm just interested to know, you know, if we're being pessimistic, which I often am, it doesn't look like we're going to have, you know, everyone out on the street again for quite a while yet. So I'm really interested, and it's kind of about that political power thing, but what do you do now? You know, like there's 6 to 12 months perhaps where there's not going to be a mass green protest. A lot of it is this kind of stuff, and it's just not as effective, right? Like that's clear. It's a different thing. I'm wondering where you go, if there's any idea where you go from here, if there's a next stage in the next 6 to 12 months that looks a little different than what the last year has been.
Morgan, are you, excuse me, you're just directing it in general to the group, I take it?
Yeah, that's anyone that's...
Sure, anyone. So please,
yeah.
Anyone who would like to answer that, feel free. Samia, Tavie, anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, I definitely, that's really the big question. That's what we've been kind of figuring out how to do for the past year. We've been, you know, we're a movement based on climate strikes, and that's the one thing we can't do. So finding our direction has certainly been difficult. But I think this year has been really important for educating people on specifically like the intersection of crises of climate and systemic racism and all of those intersecting crises, global health as well. And spreading awareness about different issues. And I believe that can continue for the next 6 to 12 months, but also inspiring community action within, in safe ways with your bubbles or your family, friends, etc. And just spreading what you know as far and wide as you can, and getting involved in an online capacity. We know that it may not be as effective, but it's better than nothing, of course. So that's something we need to be inspiring for everyone. And there are tons of different ways that you can get involved, and especially with an upcoming federal election, potentially inspiring, if you can vote, getting out there and voting, and encouraging everyone around you who can vote to do so. Yeah.
Yeah, I can touch on that super quickly as well. I really just want to echo what Allie said earlier about speaking to your politicians and telling them what you want. I think that's a huge part of it. But I also think, echoing what Tavie said as well, just like getting involved and like organizing for and volunteering for and making sure that we get people actually elected into office who are going to fight for climate action, I think is a really huge thing that can be done during COVID. And so I think especially fighting to elect young people and elect minorities and elect people who are traditionally underrepresented and marginalized, I think is going to be a huge part of the fight going forward. But I think there's a million things that we can do just from our homes, like writing letters to the editor, like talking to our politicians on Zoom, like doing things like this, I think are all amazing. So just whatever way you can get involved, just do something and don't be complacent, I guess.
I would also like to add to how I was looking into social media, all those United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, those are actually being, everybody's asked, all these minorities, women, they're able to contribute and voice to ask to what actions can be taken in order to accomplish these goals using our social media. So it still is a positive and a very powerful tool to still contribute and convey our ideas.
And Morgan, thank you for that question. I'll add that there's two things I think we've been trying to do in response to being completely blocked with our usual activism. First one is just watching and learning. As we said at the very beginning, we watch and learn what governments are capable of doing. We watch and learn how you ask industries to change what they produce and how they produce because there's a crisis. And so I'm kind of collecting all that information. I'm kind of ready to kind of bring it up again when it's relevant. So that's the first one. And the second is it allowed us to focus on things that we couldn't protest for necessarily, but are massive movements. And right now we're looking at crime rights finance through obviously divestment movements, which you've heard about many times, but also switching banks as individuals, or looking at how investors have a big role in potentially switching. And I guess we could have done it before the pandemic, but the result is we weren't doing it because we were spending a lot of time getting ourselves mobilized physically. And so these are topics that are kind of on top of our agenda. And as youth, we have a big job of trying to understand them first and then trying to address them. So that's taking quite a bit of our time, but I think it's going to be a productive use of our time.
And yeah, to add to that, maybe you haven't seen the youth in the medias as much, because we have, for example, in Quebec, we have organized protests. We have organized many actions that were just a leverage for social movements. So it's not our place to be at the forefront, but we've been there to support the migrant justice, for example, and other groups that are really at the forefront right now with the pandemic.
Thank you all. Morgan, do you have a follow-up question you'd like to ask?
No, that kind of covers it. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions, s'il vous plaît? No more questions? So this will conclude today's roundtable. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Ceci conclut la conférence aujourd'hui. Merci à tout le monde pour être là.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you again very, very soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.